I'm standing outside the White House on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., where President Barack Obama will continue his second term as the President of the United States. There is still euphoria ringing across the United States for those people who came out in support of a re-election for President Obama. Now, the one thing that can be credited to his re-election is the Get Out and Vote campaign. Now, the Get Out and Vote campaign is a very famous group of people, campaign officials and volunteers who come together to drum up last-minute support for the candidates of their choice. And how they do that, they pick up the phones, they knock on doors, they get out the material and answer any question that voters have in order to fully understand who they're voting for and why. Over the last few elections, this has played a massive role in being able to re-elect the candidate of choice. And this time round in particular, it really worked in President Obama's favor. We spoke to a campaign official who took us through the impact this has on the final outcome of the election. This is what he had to say.
So first what we do is the foundation is really in the volunteers. The people that we recruit or come out to us, we take them through the process from here's the message, here's what the campaigns stand for, make phone calls, knock on doors, send letters to the editor, contact your neighbors. And all this builds up. And while we're doing this, we're also counting backwards from Election Day.
So each of the sheets on the inside will have a person's name and their information, and then it's broken up by street, and there'll be an even and odd side. So you can normally, it's not a great one because it's kind of spread out, but they'll be able to go up one side of the street and come down the other. So basically, just get them all set up on the clipboard. A little bit of lit for the Senate candidate, Tim Kaine, in case they still haven't heard about him. Obviously, I mean, everybody's heard about the presidential race, but sometimes they haven't heard about the Senate race yet. And then this is actually a sample ballot that we send them out with. So we'll put these under here. So they've got those, so they can either give them to them, or if they're not home, they just take it and they leave one each, and then they're good to go.
So this time around, campaign officials were aggressively carrying out the door-to-door campaigns to the very last minute. And in a large way, this eventually led to the re-election of President Barack Obama, as the Democratic campaign officers were really drumming up support for him. And Willis, what about the electoral process this time around?
Right, John, it was a very elaborate electoral process that we witnessed here, and one of the things that stood out for us is even as we continued to walk around with them during the voting process, many people turned out to vote. They were very enthusiastic about it all through the election process. That was the main thing that both Obama and Romney were saying, look, come out and vote. It doesn't matter who you're going to come out and vote for, but just come out and vote. And one of the other things was that there was really a sort of invisible security force. I mean, the security was there, but it was kind of invisible, much like right here outside the White House where we are right now. As you can see, really, if you look out in the background, you might not see any sort of visible, quote-unquote, police presence, but they're there. A lot of anxiety was probably over here in the White House, but now everything is settled. 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue continues to be President Barack Obama's address. But the elaborate electoral process, let's get back to that. And we spoke to one of the chief judges over there, which is the equivalent of a presiding officer, who walked us through what exactly happens when you come up. And we also followed a Kenyan, one Mrs. Mukami, as she went to cast her ballot for one of the candidates.
Well, normally when people come in, they will line up in the queue inside the door. And when it's real busy, it actually comes all the way outside the door. And they will come in and they will give us their name, their address, their birth date, and we will present them with a voter card and a little piece of paper that tells them who they are. They go and they vote, and then they turn their card back in. If they come in and they are not in our system in any way, shape, or form, everyone that walks in the door gets to vote. They vote what is called provisionally, which means a paper ballot. So they would fill in an application, put the ballot inside of there, and that goes to the Board of Elections. The Board of Elections will review that paper application, say, oh yes, this person is valid to vote, and their vote will count. Or they'll say, no, this person's not registered, and their vote will not count.
All right, so that is the electoral process. But if you look at the ballot paper, the Americans this time were not just voting for the president and not just voting for his vice president. They were also voting for the senators and the congressmen. And also they were in a sort of a referendum in terms of same-sex marriage and other important facets of the Constitution in specific states that needed to be changed. So what exactly did this look like? What is a sample ballot? We had somebody to walk us through it so that we can understand what exactly they're going through. Let's take a look at that as well.
This is actually a sample ballot that we send them out with as well. So it's got all of the folks on the ballot, all three races, the president and vice president, the Senate race, and the House of Representatives race for that district. And then a couple of other questions that are going to be on the ballot, some constitutional amendments, some bond issues that need to be affirmed by the voters.
My biggest concern is what's called a drop-off. So there's a lot of people that come out for President Obama, and there's three names on the ballot. There's the president, the Senate, and the congressional candidate. There's a lot of people that just come out to vote for the president, but they don't know that they also have to vote in the Senate race and the congressional race, and that's called drop-off. And if we have enough drop-off, there's a chance where the other side's Senate or the other side's congressional candidate gets in.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, and our viewers back at home. You know a little about the electoral process. You know a little about what exactly they were voting for. What are some of the people that are voting for that, the president, the senator. Much like the things that we are going to be voting for when it comes to March 4th, 2013, next year, the lessons that we can take from here, one of them very important, is the level of decorum, especially when they were conceding victory and the acceptance speech. Janet.
That is something that people are still talking about. Mitt Romney was very gracious. He was even saying, you know, pray for President Obama. This is a time that our country needs a great leader. And more than that, as you've mentioned, Willis, is the integrity in which this election was carried out, the voting process as well. Save for a few flaws here and there. We saw a case in Florida where people still didn't know the final outcome there. But aside from that, generally a very mature electoral process that took shape. And obviously, we're hoping that this can be reflected in our own elections back home. Yes, the argument is that the U.S. has had a lot of time to perfect it. Doesn't mean we can't start trying to get it perfected. And indeed, baby steps, exactly, and we'll get there. And you know, a lot of people thought that this election was going to go against President Barack Obama. They talked about the fact that they didn't like his healthcare reform bill, that the unemployment was sky high, as many critics said. But as we saw in the final outcome, a large majority say that they need their president, and he deserves another 4 more years to continue what it is he started here at the White House. Reporting from the White House in Washington, D.C. for Citizen TV, I'm Janet Mbogwa.
And I am Willis Rabun.